open a coffin that says "Do not open" on the front. As soon as they got to Hooligan Village, Hiccup and Fishlegs changed into dry-ish clothes. Burke was one of those damp places where clothes never really dried. They became warm and wet rather than cold and wet. They hurried as quickly as they could towards the Great Hall. By the time they got there, Stoic had called a big meeting of everyone, and the Great Hall was already packed to bursting, with great hairy hooligans jostling each other for a good view of the coffin, which had been placed on a table in front of the fire. Bit by bit, Hiccup and Fishlegs managed to wriggle their way through the crowd to the front. "Ah, Hiccup, there you are," said Hiccup's father, Stoic the Vast, absent-mindedly, as he consulted with the other elders in front of the coffin. Stoic was a terrifying red-head bull of a man, whose belly turned a corner a good foot or two before the rest of him. "Interesting find you've made here, my boy," said Stoic, ruffling his son's hair proudly. "The lost treasure of Grimbeard the Ghastly, hey?" "Yes, father, but—" said Hiccup. "We're just about to open it," said Stoic. "But what I'm trying to say is," interrupted old Wrinkly, the cleverest and most ancient elder of the hooligan tribe, "it is written quite clearly on the top, 'Do not open this coffin. Cursed be who disturbs the reigns of Grimbeard the Ghastly. The greatest pirate ever struck terror in the Inner Isles. In my considerable experience, it is always a good idea not to open a coffin that says 'Do not open' on the front." "I agree," said Hiccup nervously. "Grimbeard the Ghastly was a nasty piece of work. Anyone who opens the coffin could be in for a horrible shock." "Rubbish!" scoffed Stoic the Vast. "A warning like that to put off grave robbers should not stay the hand of fearsome Vikings like ourselves. Shall we, who laugh in the face of death and spit in the eye of the great typhoon, quail at a simple curse to scare infants and old men?" Cries of "No!" and "Not likely, Governor!" "All in favour of opening up the box and seeing whether the lost treasure of Grimbeard the Ghastly is inside, say aye." "Aye!" bellowed out of every member of the hooligan tribe except for Fishlegs, Old Wrinkly, and Hiccup. "Run for your lives!" yelped Toothless, and hid in Hiccup's shirt. Fishlegs edged backwards into the crowd. "Not a good idea, not a good idea, not a good idea," muttered Hiccup. He started backing away from the coffin as Stoic fiddled clumsily with the iron clasps. "Not a good idea, not a good idea, not a good idea," repeated Hiccup as Stoic slowly creaked up the coffin lid. The coffin lid dropped open with a bang. Stoic jumped away to avoid being splashed by the seawater gushing out from all sides. Everybody else tried very hard not to look nervous. Stoic peered into the coffin. There was a bit of a pause. "Not pretty, was he?" sniffed Stoic the Vast, trying to show off how much he laughed in the face of death. "Oh, I don't know, sir," said Gobber the Belch, leaning in to look as well. "I think there's a bit of a family resemblance." "I know what you mean," said Baggy Bum the Beer Belly, turning his head thoughtfully. "There's a look of great Aunt Hefty Thighs." Hiccup forced himself to open his eyes. If he was going to be a pirate, he would have to get used to this sort of thing. He made himself peer over the edge and into the coffin. There, in a state of green and yellow decay, lay the corpse of Grimbeard the Ghastly. It wasn't so bad, really. The face was all slimy and drippy, but it wasn't crawling with maggots or anything. anything disgusting. Rather peaceful, really. Lying so still. And then Hiccups was sure he saw one of the paper-white fingers twitch slightly. He blinked and stared hard at it. Nothing for a second, and then there it was again. A deafening quivering. The corpse, stuttered Hiccup. It's moving. Nonsense, boy, snapped Gobber the Belch. How can he possibly move? He's dead, isn't he? And he gave the corpse a prod with one of his fat forefingers. The corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly snapped straight upright, propelled by some appealing force from within it. Yellow eyes popping, dribbling green face contorted in a ghastly grimace. Ah! Gurgled the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly straight into the face of Gobber the Belch. Ah! Screamed Gobber the Belch, jumping quite 3 feet in the air, with his hair and beard sticking out in all directions with the shock of it. Ah! Yelled the rest of the tribe. For while hooligans do indeed laugh in the face of death, and spit in the eye of the great typhoon, they have a morbid fear of the supernatural. Stoic dived under the table with his arms over his head in a vague belief that if he couldn't see it, it couldn't see him. Sea water poured from the coffin. The corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly made disgusting choking noises. The veins on its popping yellow eyes stood out. Its grey mouth quivered horribly. Only Old Wrinkly remained calm. "Don't panic," said Old Wrinkly. "This is not the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly." Hiccup had frozen in sheer terror, but he trusted Old Wrinkly, and he opened his eyes. Nobody else took any notice whatsoever. They went on panicking like crazy. "Wouldn't preserve me from the terminally stupid," muttered Old Wrinkly under his breath, and he started yelling the only language the hooligans really understood. "Don't panic! This is not the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly!" As he yelled, he patted the corpse that wasn't a corpse hard on the back. Seawater spurted out in all directions, gushing out of his nose and ears and mouth. It wasn't the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly. It wasn't the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly. Now that it had recovered from its coughing fit, it was clearly a tall, good-looking man, very much alive, if a little green from the effects of the seawater. "So," said Stoic from under the table, "that is definitely not the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly?" The corpse that was not a corpse shook his head. "Oh, no," it said faintly. "Definitely not. Easy mistake to make, but no, I'm not." And it slithered out of the coffin in a rush of seawater. It removed its helmet and, under the circumstances, performed a remarkably graceful bow. "The name is Alvin. Alvin the, poor but honest farmer." Alvin had quick, clever, laughing eyes. He had a long, elegant mustache, a little limp from the seawater. He smiled a charming, easygoing smile, although a fussy person might think that perhaps it had too much teeth in it. Alvin stepped gracefully forward to pat Hiccup on the head. "And who might you be then, sonny?" "Hiccup Horrendous Haddock the Third," stammered Hiccup. "Greetings," said Alvin, the poor but honest farmer. He stood to peer under the table. "I presume from the air of natural authority that you must be the chief of this tribe." "Stoic the Vast," replied Stoic. Alvin clapped a hand to his forehead. Not thee, Stoic the Vast, terror of the seas, most high ruler of the hairy hooligans. Oh, hear thy name and tremble, ugh, ugh, by an extraordinary coincidence. You are the very man I've been searching for. Stoic crawled out from under the table, staggered to his feet, and puffed out his chest. That's me, said Stoic the Vast, in much of his old, hearty manner. And may I ask, if you're not the corpse of Grimsbeard the Ghastly, what in wonder's name were you doing in this coffin? What a remarkably bright question, replied Alvin enthusiastically. And if I could just sit down in this comfortable-looking chair, it's been a long day. Oh, yes, of course, said Stoic, dusting off his throne. And I would be delighted to tell you my tale, said Alvin.